let's just come back then to how most people view the world. And then we can talk about what you describe as the mother of all problems or the mother of all mistakes. So we tend to think there is a world out there. We are born in the world in the form of this body and mind. And actually, we are the self within the body and the mind, separate from everything out there. There's a world out there and there's a self in here. And that seems pretty self-evident. But what we're saying, or what you're saying, is that that right there is a fundamental misunderstanding from which all the sort of suffering and this desire for accumulation comes from fundamentally.
Yes, it hinges around what we know to be experientially and what we believe to be.
Yeah.
If we ask ourselves what I believe to be, most people would say, well, I am this body. But then, if we would tell them, let's assume for the moment that your consciousness, whatever it is, which is talking with me right now, which is hearing my words, let's assume for a moment that this consciousness is not dependent upon this body you believe to be. And let's assume that your body reaches its end. You arrive at the pearly gates, and then there is this angel telling you, well, you have not been very good in your life. You have not been too bad either. So the boss has decided to give you an option. You can either keep this consciousness of yours and lose your body, or you can keep your body and lose this consciousness of yours. What is it going to be? And the obvious answer is, what's the use of a body without consciousness? So the obvious answer is, I am consciousness rather than the body. That's why I choose consciousness. Of course, you can object, but Francis, all of that is based upon the assumption that consciousness is not dependent on the body, whereas I know very well that my consciousness is dependent upon the body. To which I would say, not so far. What's the evidence? What's the evidence that this consciousness, which is hearing my words right now, is dependent upon or limited by or to this body? You see? And that's a question very few have asked, because it's a forbidden question in our culture, in the society where we live. The answer is, obviously the consciousness is dependent on the body. It's a phenomenon that appears out of the complexity of some living organisms. Whereas, if we investigate a little deeper, we have to admit that consciousness is the reality of our human experience. experientially, it is the reality of our human experience, because the rest comes and goes. So the reality of our human experience has to be always present in our human experience. So, and then this body is part of the world that surrounds it. Because of that, its reality has to be the reality of the world. The world and the body in it share the same reality. So even if I say this consciousness is dependent upon this body, the reality of this consciousness is the reality of this body, which is also the reality of everything. And then already we have moved out of this very unexplored belief that this consciousness is limited to or by this human body. And this belief, I call it ignorance. This belief is, as you alluded to earlier on, the mother of all misery.
So you use the word belief, and belief is obviously a word that people would direct towards religion, but not science on the whole. If you said to someone that, oh, the fact you believe that consciousness, awareness, whatever it is that is hearing these words, is coming from the body, from the brain, that is not a fact. That is a belief. So actually, in that sense, the materialist worldview based on this assumption is not hugely dissimilar to religious belief.
That's true. The real distinction that could be made between what we call belief, if you ask me point blank, do you believe that there is gravity on the surface of the earth? I would say yes. But in this case, I've used the word belief very loosely, because that is verified experientially. So in fact, it's a fact. So when I use the word belief, I refer to a concept which is deemed to be true, but for which there is zero experiential foundation. Not a shred of evidence that it is true. In other words, such a belief is purely optional. We are not compelled to believe it to be true, because there is no experiential verification or evidence of it. So the metaphor I use is the belief in Santa Claus. Although, in the case of Santa Claus, as a child, we may have seen pictures of Santa Claus. We may also have been taken a picture of in the laps, sitting on Santa Claus' laps of this man who smelled a little bit like booze at the department store. You see? And so at least regarding the Santa Claus belief, we had some apparent evidence of its existence, of his existence, Santa Claus's existence. But regarding the dependency of consciousness with regard to the human body, we have zero evidence. We only believe that we have evidence, but we have no direct evidence whatsoever.